Hello, everyone, and welcome to another day of updates from the war in Ukraine. This is October the 17th of 2022. The main thing on the agenda today is a plane crash in Russia. The current count, according to the Russian government, is 4 dead, 6 missing, and 25 injured. The crash occurred in Yeysk, which is directly on the coast of the Sea of Azov. We've also seen another wave of Russian missile attacks, and of course some drone attacks as well. And although these seem to be targeting major cities as well, the key point here is that these look less like terror attacks than what we saw after the Crimean Bridge was attacked. This seems to be targeting heavily energy infrastructure, and for that there are 2 reasons. Number 1 is pretty obvious. They're making life more difficult for the civilian population, and that's likely to have a near zero impact on the progress of the war. Now, number 2 is more interesting. As a result of these attacks, last week's and this week's, Ukraine is stopping energy exports to the European Union. Now, last month, for September, these exports brought Ukraine about $150 million in profits. Now, this makes up generally around 5% of Ukraine's monthly exports. And especially for a country which is already struggling economically, that is very significant. Still, I don't think it's going to have any huge impact. Economically, Russia is already outmatched. The West can outspend it on Ukraine. So in the long term, the economic war is not one that Russia can win. So that's all the news from Ukraine today, but we do have 2 questions. First, any comment on the US CHIPS and Science Act and the impact on China? For those who don't know, the CHIPS and Science Act is primarily a $50 billion investment recently passed by the US Congress to invest in electronics, mostly semiconductor chips. Currently, these are almost exclusively produced in Taiwan, which has the potential to create huge problems for the world economy if there is a Chinese invasion. So this investment on its own is meant to make the US more self-sufficient and less dependent on Taiwan in this field. Now, there are a lot of reasons that semiconductors are important, but a key one is that they're needed for modern weapons. So for as long as the US isn't manufacturing its own semiconductors, that's a good reason to think that they would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese attack. So on its own, it would look like this makes it easier for China to move against Taiwan, and would leave Taiwan more vulnerable. But I think in the big picture, we've been seeing that the US is already committed to countering China, starting with the Obama-era pivot to Asia, and that continued a lot more aggressively under Trump. But it hasn't really stopped with Biden. It's just been a bit more quiet. So this seems to me like it's mostly about military production and economic security rather than a foreign policy thing. And now for the second question. Do you think Putin will be looking for a way out? And on this, I'm going to go with a solid no. We've seen him in Kazakhstan recently at a conference, and he comes across as happy, relaxed, confident. And of course, to us, that's very counterintuitive because he's not doing well. He's losing the war. He shouldn't be happy. But first of all, there's no way to know exactly how accurate his picture of the situation is if he knows how badly it's going exactly. And second, he really does, I think, believe a lot of what he's saying about Ukraine and Russia being one country. So he is driven by a genuine and strong belief that what he's doing is important and necessary for Russia. So he's confident that Russia is a strong country and that they're going to prevail in this civilizational clash with the West, even if they have to continue escalating and making sacrifices like the mobilization. They're still going to win in the end. So I think he thinks even if he's not winning now, it's only a matter of time. And there's also a second factor, which I don't think is on his mind as much yet. And that's the referendums in September to annex the 4 regions of Ukraine. That's kind of like him driving down the highway, seeing an off-ramp, and destroying it with dynamite. He can't really get off now the same way that he would be able to before. Previously, he could just say if he wanted to, we've accomplished our goal, we've taken parts of the Donbass, we've demilitarized, denazified Ukraine, whatever, we're going home now, we've accomplished our goals, we've won. And now that's not so much of an option. because if they did, they'd be abandoning territory that they've already claimed as part of Russia now. And right now, with the Ukrainian military on the offensive and generally winning, they can't just take what they have, what they already hold, and say, we're calling it a day, this is ours now and you can keep the rest, goodbye. If they try to do that, Ukraine will just keep fighting until they've reclaimed everything that they want to reclaim. So not only is he not looking for a way out right now, but he actually doesn't have a way out unless his military starts winning again and Ukraine decides that it's better to negotiate. And both the change in the flow of battle and Ukraine being willing to negotiate with Putin seem very unlikely right now. This has been updates from Ukraine for October the 17th of 2022, and thank you for listening.